Okay, so we're going to start video number 2, which is part of your global review number 2, but it's all part of Unit 1's quiz, which you'll have as your first quiz of review. Again, these tips about flipped review, again, 2 number 3s, just make sure you do this work while everything is fresh in your mind. When we see belief systems essays, we usually see them as, okay, select 2 belief systems, explain one major idea of the belief system, and discuss the effects the belief system has had on a nation or region or people. Notice that you have to pick 2 here. For the multiple choice portion of the exam, you need to know a lot about each belief system. But for the essay, you need to know a great deal amount of information about 2 of the belief systems. This again is a document-based question, and it gives you 3 choices: Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism, and asks you to pick 2. Same idea. So these are basically the regions of the world where you'll see the beginnings of each religion. Animism in the continent of Africa, Islam in the Middle East, Christianity in the Middle East, Judaism in the Middle East, Hinduism and Buddhism begin in India, Hinduism stays there, Buddhism grows, Taoism and Confucianism in China, and Shintoism in Japan. Confucianism is based on an idea of a guy named Confucius, and he believed in order, and that order brought harmony, and that there were 5 relationships: ruler to subject, man to wife, father to son, older brother to younger brother, friend to friend. This all is based on this idea of filial piety, where you have this obligation to be a good member of society. And Confucius writes the book The Analects. The impact is this idea of the mandate of heaven in China and the dynastic system, the respect for authority, and we even say that even up to Mao. Strict gender and class roles, strict family structures. The idea of the civil service exams emerged because Confucius and Confucian scholars believed that if you were good at your job, therefore you should be able to excel at it, and that you shouldn't get a job based on who you know, but what you know. That's the definition of the word merit, M-E-R-I-T. Scholars have a high status in this whole Confucius system. Mao will twist this system and this foundation of their culture, of the Chinese culture, to suit his needs. Buddhism. Buddha was the enlightened one, otherwise known as Siddhartha Gautama. And enlightenment is the end of suffering. Suffering is caused by desire. If you follow the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, you will reach nirvana, which is the state of not wanting anything. You are completely at peace. Buddhists always also believe in reincarnation. Like I said, Buddhism spreads from India to most of Asia. And today in Tibet, one of the famous Buddhist leaders is the Dalai Lama. And this idea of Zen monks and Buddhism, and this idea of really giving up worldly pleasures, is really an Asian idea. It's not something you go to temple every day or you go to temple once a week. It's more of a way of life. In Hinduism, you're going to see it only in India. Very strict triangle here: priests, academics on top, untouchables don't even have a caste. Now, the caste system has been outlawed in this new democratic India since independence, but it still is part of their culture. The holy books of the Hindu faiths include the Vedas, which include the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. Hindus believe in dharma and karma. If you do good duty to your caste, if you do good dharma, you get good karma. You may be reincarnated in a higher caste. Of course, this is polytheistic, and like I said, it's all based on this caste system. The problem is that the Indians were already divided, and so when the Europeans came in, especially the English, they just had to conquer. And so when the English colonized India, they colonized them as their crown jewel. India was able to give them rice, tobacco, cotton, tea, cheap labor. And this will lead to the Indian Independence Movement, or the Indian National Congress, the INC. Between World War I and World War II and after, Gandhi worked to end this caste system and to treat the untouchables better. And like I said, the caste system's outlawed, but the issues still persist. This is just a little chart you might want to go back to about the basic beliefs. Animism is the belief that nature has a soul, the belief that things in nature, everything, has a soul or consciousness. We kind of think of it as more Native Americans. The impact is that when the Europeans colonized Africa or North and South American continents, they put Christianity on the people that were living there, and they forced it. and they did not accept the animistic beliefs. This comes into play in the new imperialism of the Berlin Conference and that whole scramble for Africa where Christian missionaries are used, this idea of social Darwinism. Also, the impact of Islam when Mansa Musa travels from Mali to Mecca, showing the growth of Islam. Shintoism, again, in Japan. These are over here some structures, and you can see this torii, which is, it represents the division in Shintoism between the everyday world and the divine world. The impact, we can see, probably the most famous one is the kami, this idea of divine wind, this idea of the kamikaze pilots basically using their planes as the weapon and driving their planes into their targets, and they're known as kamikaze pilots in World War II. We see it in architecture, we see it in interior design, we see it in the little small bonsai landscaping, that this idea of connection to nature. Also, Japan lives in a climate that has earthquakes and tsunamis, and so they have this real respect for nature. Judaism is the first monotheistic belief system, and Jews worship from the Torah and the Talmud. They believe that they are the chosen people. They worship in a synagogue or a temple. Jews and Christians both believe in the Ten Commandments. They believe that God handed these 10 commandments to Moses. They are impacted by the diaspora, in which the Romans kicked the Jewish tribes out of the Roman Empire, and so we see this scattering, which of course will later lead to Zionism, which we talked about when we talked about the creation of Israel. Of course, this creates a lot of anti-Semitism, Holocaust, the creation of Israel in 1948, and the present Arab-Israeli conflict. Basic Christian beliefs. Jesus was a Jew, and he says that he's the Son of God, and the followers of Jesus become known as Christian. And so you have God, the Creator, the Word, the Spirit, atonement for sins, faith in Jesus, and, of course, that he is the Son of God. That's what Christians believe. Resurrection and the second coming. The belief in sacraments, baptismal, Eucharist or communion, and healing, and the idea of a place to worship, of course, which is the church. The Roman Empire is the first empire to adopt Christianity, and they adopt it as the Roman Catholic Church, the RCC. The Middle Ages is a time when the RCC really takes the position that the Roman Empire had. This leads, of course, to many of the Crusades, 4 of them, and where the Catholic Church is trying to get the Muslims out of the Holy Land. Then, in the 1500s, we have the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther raging against the selling of indulgences, and this is going to lead to not just the Catholic Church anymore, but lots of different Protestant Christian faiths. Modern Ireland and England, not as much as today as in the past, but especially in Northern Ireland, we have a division between Catholics and Protestants, and we still see that today as an issue. Islam is probably one of the fastest growing religions in the world, and you can see percentages here on this map that you have a huge percentage in blue here in North Africa and what we'd consider the Middle East. If you practice Islam, you use the Quran as your holy book, you pray in a mosque, you believe in the 5 pillars, that faith, God is Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, you believe in fasting during the month of Ramadan, you believe in giving alms or charity, you believe in a pilgrimage to Mecca, Hajj, once in your life, and that you pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. Impact again is the Crusades. Mansa Musa can show an impact, the achievements of the Golden Islamic Age, the achievements and the expansion of the Ottoman Empire, and then of course modern day Islamic fundamentalism, let's say in Iran, or even radical Islamic sects that we see later on. This is just another map of the world and where you're going to find people who practice basic belief systems. In blue, again, you have the Muslims, and then the Roman Catholics in yellow that makes up a big percentage, and then other Christians here in red, and of course in pink you have the Hindus, and you can kind of see this idea, Shintoism here, where they're concentrated. All right, let's do some practice. The spread of Islam throughout the African continent is an example of national security, socialism, cultural diffusion, or self-determination. You are right. The animist religions which are widespread throughout Africa share a belief in monotheism, the importance of the spirits of nature, the writings of Muhammad, or making a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The correct answer is 2. Animists, spirits of nature. Mansa Musa's journey to Mecca in the 1300s is evidence that 1. The Crusades had a great influence on Western Africa. Most African leaders were educated in the Middle East. European culture was superior to the cultures of Western Africa, or Islam had a major influence on the Mali Empire. This is the big one. When you see Mansa Musa, cultural diffusion, and the impact of Islam, the terms Brahma, Dharma, and Moksha are most closely associated with which religion? Well, that is a religion called Hinduism that we've talked about, and probably Dharma is the one term we talk about the most when we talk about Hinduism. In India, the caste system has existed for many centuries because contact between India and the rest of the world has been limited. The Hindu doctrines of Dharma and Karma support the caste system promoted industrialization, or the Indian Congress Party supported a rigid class structure. Number 2 is it. Religious differences between Muslims and Hindus in the Indian subcontinent after World War II led to increased control by the British colonial government, an arbitrated settlement by the United Nations, the creation of the nations of India and Pakistan, increased communist influence in the region. It's number 3. Can anyone think of what the word is for that splitting of countries? We see it in the Middle East, we see it in India and Pakistan. If you're thinking about the word partitioned, you are absolutely right. They were partitioned. In addition to providing water for Indian agriculture, the Ganges River remains important to India because it is the only source of Indian hydroelectric power, a sacred river for the Hindu population, the birthplace of the Hindu civilization, an unofficial boundary between Hindus and Muslims. If you remember, it's a sacred river for the Hindu population. According to Buddhist principles, believers can end personal suffering by doing good deeds, eliminating selfish desires, making pilgrimage to Mecca, or relying on divine help. It's all about eliminating suffering. And if you eliminate your suffering, you're eliminating your selfish desires. Which belief system is most closely associated with the terms Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, and Nirvana? Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, or Shinto? If you pick Buddhism, you are correct. The 10 Commandments and 5 Pillars of Wisdom are similar in that they establish a class structure for society, are guidelines for living, consist of prayers for salvation, or promise a happy and easy life. Are guidelines for living. Which factor has contributed most to the social and cultural identity of the Middle East? Is it political stability of the region, ability of the region to export oil, lack of foreign involvement in the region, or strong influence of Islam on the region? Always go with religion there if it's not an economic question. Judaism and Christianity are similar because they base their beliefs on the Quran, stress belief in reincarnation, are monotheistic, promote the practice of polygamy. They are monotheistic, and they also both believe in the 10 Commandments. In which Middle Eastern nation is Islamic fundamentalism the guiding force? Is it Turkey, Iran, Israel, or Jordan? Iran, especially since 1979 revolution. A goal of most modern-day fundamentalist Islamic societies is to encourage the practice of other religions in society, maintain basic religious values in a technological society, adopt Western attitudes, values, and lifestyles, integrate the teachings of Muhammad with Christian practices. It's all about maintaining their values in a technological world. One way in which Eastern Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, and Protestantism are similar is that each, except the supreme authority of the Pope, rejects the Old Testament as part of the Bible, is a branch of Christianity, was once the official religion of the Byzantine Empire. The answer is they're all Christians. A person who practices the Shinto faith would most likely to visit a shrine placed on the shore of a lake, pray 5 times a day, bathe in the Ganges River, or make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. If you picked one, you are correct. Which pair of belief systems share a belief that spirits reside in natural objects and forms? Is it Hinduism, Confucianism, Islam and Judaism, Shintoism and animism, or Christianity and Buddhism? Number 3 is correct. The introduction of Buddhism into Japan and of Christianity into Africa are examples of modernization, ethnic conflict, cultural diffusion, or isolation. Of course, the answer is cultural diffusion. The philosophy of Confucius stresses the importance of respect for authority, religious beliefs, a classless society, or owning land. Father to son, ruler to subject, a respect for authority. A goal common to Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism is to establish peace and harmony, provide the basis for democratic government, return the power of the emperors, promote individual artistic creativity. It's establish peace and harmony. Okay, so now you go on to activity 2, and that is due in next class. When you take your quiz, I will collect your homework, activity 1 and 2.